Live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, wherever you are from, and we're very excited with this new project because it's something that we have been devoting quite some time for it, and we know that pronunciation is something that we all need to work on. So that's why we decided to have this whole week of presentations devoted to expanding teachers' repertoire and knowledge about pronunciation. But first, let me thank all the moderators, my fellow moderators, that have put this together like beautifully. Thiago Veiga, Eduardo de Freitas, Bárbara Furtado, Priscila Bordon, and have I said everybody? Yes, right?
Fernanda
Machado, exactly. And without further ado, Thiago will introduce our very first speaker, Claire Venables, and we're very excited to hear what she has to say.
Yeah, we are super excited to have Claire opening the event here for us. She is not only very experienced when it comes to young learners, but she's also the queen of our hearts. So we love her and we're very happy to have her with us. So Claire spent a decade teaching in Europe, where she obtained her Trinity DipTESOL at Oxford TEFL. She has a wide range of experience as a teacher, teacher trainer, director of studies, and materials writer. However, her true passion is teaching English to young learners. So since moving to Brazil in 2011, she has been involved in the creation and implementation of language programs in schools, teaching training courses, and is an active member of the National English Teachers Association, BRAZ-TESOL. We all know. She's a board member of two special interest groups, Voices for Women and Young Learners and Teens, and she's the director of Active English. So Claire, over to you.
Thank you very much, Thiago, for that beautiful introduction. Hi, BrELTers. Thiago actually said a lot of what I was about to say. Thank you for introducing me, Thiago. One thing that Thiago didn't mention, though, is that anyone who knows me knows that I love what I do. And I also love connecting with my online teaching community to help strengthen and grow the ELT in Brazil. That's why it is such an honor to be here tonight. You have no idea how excited I was when the moderating team got in contact with me to invite me to talk about a topic that I am not only very passionate about on a professional level, but also on a personal level as the mother of a bilingual child. I don't know if any of you knew that I have an 8-year-old bilingual. So welcome to this session on teaching pronunciation to young learners. As Thiago said, I'm Claire Venables and I'm going to share my screen. Pronunciation in a young learner classroom. Here we go. To kickstart this webinar, I'd like to invite you all to first reflect on the role of the young learner teacher and the current changes we face every single day in the classroom. And I'd like to ask you all to answer this question. Is it reasonable to expect young learner teachers to work on pronunciation with their learners on top of all the other responsibilities that they already have? I bet you weren't expecting me to start with that question. And my second question is it even worth dedicating our limited class time to this, to pronunciation? Have a think about that for a minute. Let me tell you this. As a young learner teacher myself, I am very aware of how much time and energy is involved in teaching kids. I mean, teaching's not just about the hours you're in the classroom, and everybody knows that. But the young learner teacher dedicates time and energy to things that other teachers just don't. I mean, if I could count up the number of hours that I've spent searching for ideas and games and printing and cutting and drawing, and if you only knew the number of Play-Doh recipes I've tested, and if I had $1 for every toilet roll I've saved from the bin, I would be rich, let me tell you. Can all of my young learner teachers listening relate to this? Well, the author Lynn Cameron puts it like this. A young learner teacher is required to have not only a knowledge of the language and of language teaching and learning, but in addition, all the skills of a good primary teacher in managing children and keeping them on task. Now, if that weren't enough, beyond the role of teaching English is the added responsibility of instilling positive attitudes towards the language, critical thinking skills, preparing students to become global citizens. The list just goes on and on and on. So where am I going with this? And what does that have to do with pronunciation? Well, I believe that pronunciation has taken a backseat for a long time, especially in the young learner classroom. With everything else going on in our lessons and in our classrooms, it almost feels like it's something we just don't have time for. Or perhaps we even see a need to, we don't see a need to work on it in any kind of explicit way. Do you know what I mean? Now, it's also, if we're 100% honest with ourselves, it's that little section of the course book that most of us skip over. And phonological knowledge of English and the teaching of pronunciation is rarely seen as an essential skill for the young learner teacher. Well, my objective for this session is to inspire and motivate you all to reconsider the role of pronunciation in your teaching. Over the next 30 minutes or so, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to examine some myths about young learners and pronunciation development. Then I'd like to go on and talk about what is it really that a teacher needs to know. Then we'll have a look at how pronunciation contributes to our learners' language acquisition. And finally, I'd like to devote a good amount of time to these practical examples of how pronunciation can be integrated into what we are already doing. And that's probably the most important part here, what we're already doing, okay? So let's take a look at some of these myths. Nixon and Tomlinson said that it is much easier to teach and correct pronunciation at an early stage in the learner's development than it is to correct time, complication, pronunciation errors later on. Isn't that interesting? And a lot of us ask this question. I mean, don't children just pick it up? Don't they just acquire good pronunciation without any meaningful effort? Well, that's what brought about this question to me. Is it worth dedicating class time to teaching pronunciation? In fact, don't children who start at an early age manage to attain, and you can't see me right now, but I'm doing inverted commas here, native-like pronunciation? Well, there has been a lot written about the advantages of an early start in language learning. And for a long time, it was thought that there was this critical period within which children could acquire other languages with greater ease, and that this cut off at around puberty. You've probably heard of that. Now, while there is empirical evidence that disputes the hypothesis that there's a biological advantage for younger children or an early start, there is still research which suggests that listening and pronunciation are two areas which do benefit from an early start. However, before we jump to any conclusions about the kind of possible implications of this on our teaching practice, we have to take a closer look at the context of the learners in this research and compare it to our own. Now, these were ESL experiences where children were placed in immersion contexts, surrounded by the foreign language in nurseries without any contact for most part of the day with their mother tongue. So this to me seems like a dramatically different experience to that of our learners here in Brazil. In fact, I would love to be able to, I wonder if I can actually see people's responses here on YouTube. But I would love to have people respond to the following questions. If we took a quick survey here of the age of your learners, the number of lessons they have per week, the number of hours per lesson, and the number of hours homework they have, I think it would paint a very different picture to the learners that we saw in these studies. As we're living in a country where English is not an official language, nor is it widely spoken in our community, I think it's fair to say that the primary source and the main place where our students receive English input is in the classroom. And as we can imagine from this survey, if we have a self-reflection on our own anecdotal evidence, let's say, from the kind of results we could expect from answering these kinds of questions, I think you'll see that even though children today have greater exposure from the internet, from songs, etc., it is a far cry from the experience that most children in these case studies who were immersed in the foreign language for hours every day. So really, here's a little anecdote that I wanted to share too from my personal life. Now, as I mentioned before, I am raising a bilingual child. Let me give you a little bit of info about him. Let me actually get this. Let's put it back so I can see him here. Okay, you see me now? So let me tell you a little bit really quickly about my son. I've been raising him bilingual since birth. I've only spoken to him in English, and his father only speaks to him in Portuguese. And he was born in Spain, and the first language he started speaking was English, and he only speaks in English to me. We moved to Brazil when he was 1.5, and he's had English classes at school every day since he was 3. So can you imagine how many hours of English he's had? And guess what? He has the most adorable little Brazilian Portuguese accent that sometimes, when we're in Australia, causes a communication breakdown, particularly with those listeners who aren't accustomed or aren't used to hearing a Brazilian Portuguese accent. So if that's the case of my son, imagine what it's like for our students. That's my little boy right there. He's 8. So what does this say to us, or what does this drive home to me? It really does highlight the need to work on pronunciation with young learners and not believe this myth that children will just pick it up, you know? So that also says something else to me. If we accept that the classroom is the main place where our learners hear and use English orally, we should also recognize that the teacher is an important source of input and needs to provide a good model for their students. But what is a good model? This is a rather delicate topic to talk about, as many non-native English speakers have spent years hearing that native speakers make the best teachers. And one of the arguments for this is pronunciation. As a young learner teacher and a director of studies, I've also heard so many parents express their concern that a non-native English speaking teacher will pass on an incorrect or undesirable accent and that they want their child to speak like a native. Well, not only is this widespread discrimination not true, as my son is living proof, a native-like accent isn't even a goal for us in 2018. Now, I'm not going to get into this, but I assure you that this will be a message that you're going to hear over and over again all throughout our pronunciation week. So I invite you now, today, to make a commitment to ending this idea that you need to have an accent from a specific country to be a good model for our students. Let's instead work towards developing some kind of pronunciation goals or setting pronunciation goals that are more realistic and useful for ourselves and our learners. For more on this topic, I want you to make sure that you don't miss Thiago Vega's talk later on this week. He's going to be talking more about this. Okay, so having said that, I do think that our pronunciation matters just as much as our vocabulary, our grammar, our accuracy, and our fluency. So is pronunciation even important in learning of an additional language? Can we justify spending time on pronunciation with all the other priorities and expectations that we have to attend to? What are the benefits for our learners? Well, Some of them may seem really, really obvious, but I think there's a few here that you might find interesting. And I know there's a lot of text here. That's so you can screenshot it and share it around with people. Hashtag roving BrELT. Let's have a look at the importance of pronunciation. Intelligible pronunciation is an essential component of communicative competence. Pronunciation errors can cause as many or even more communication breakdowns as grammar or lexis. And as Yates explains, learners with good pronunciation in English are more likely to be understood even if they make errors in other areas. Whereas learners whose pronunciation is difficult to understand will not be understood even if their grammar is perfect. I find that really eye-opening. Okay, here's a spoiler. Pronunciation, you're going to hear this tomorrow in Igor's webinar, I'm sure. Pronunciation plays an important role not only in a learner's ability to be understood when communicating, but it also directly affects their ability to understand spoken English. Finally, and most importantly, if you're a young learner teacher who's helping children in those early stages of literacy or even pre-literacy, phonological awareness or the ability to hear sounds and syllables in English directly affect literacy development. So that was a really big one for me to learn about. What should we teach is the next topic. We've looked at some strong arguments in favour of devoting precious class time to working on pronunciation, but I believe that what often puts off a lot of young learner teachers is not knowing exactly what to teach. Most authors agree that the focus should be working on those aspects that affect intelligibility. In fact, Jenna Jenkins has even proposed a syllabus for non-native speakers of English as a lingua franca, and that describes what our priorities should be for obtaining mutual intelligibility. This is an excellent reference for you to check out. Now, there is a lot of pronunciation work that can be done in response to the problems that teachers hear while monitoring their students' oral production. I mean, this is done much in the same way as you would look out for grammar and vocabulary mistakes and errors. But as Jared Kelly points out, it's another great book that you should get your hands on, there needs to be a move towards planned pronunciation teaching as well. And that can be as simple as taking into consideration the potential difficulties that your learners might have with the language that you're planning to revise or introduce in that lesson. Now, again here, just really quickly, we can highlight, again, the advantage of being a native speaker, a native speaking teacher here. Because if you are a speaker of Brazilian Portuguese with Brazilian Portuguese learners, it becomes really easy to predict what areas of pronunciation are going to be challenging for your students. So let's just bear that in mind. There's lots of other things that you could take into consideration, but as my goal here tonight is to highlight ways of making pronunciation viable for every young learner teacher, I think these 2 tips are enough to get you started. Listen out for problems and respond to them, and predict difficulties that your learners will have when you're planning, and think of ways that you're going to work on these. So that covers the what. So what about how? And this for me was actually the really fun part of preparing this, the how, because I'm all about the practical activities. I love planning lessons. So I've put together a whole bunch of ideas that you were going to be able to implement in your classes without having to do anything that you're not already doing. So that's my aim anyway. Let's see how I did. The how. Right. So this brings me, this is the most important part of my talk. I'll start off by saying there have been some amazing results from teachers who have used an analytic linguistic approach. So that's one which uses information and tools like the phonetic alphabet or descriptions, charts of the vocal apparatus, this kind of contrastive information and other aids. So if you are a pronunciation enthusiast, I would really be checking out the color-coded phonemic chart created by Margaret Horrigan. It's really nice. But tonight, as promised, I want to look at ways which you can work on developing your young learners' pronunciation using the activities that you're already doing. I said that before and I'll say it again. We're going to be having a look at the intuitive, imitative approach. Songs, chants and rhymes, games, stories, and even our teacher talk, okay? So let's start off by looking at games. Pronunciation in games. There are lots of traditional children's games that use songs and chants. For example, I wish I had you all looking at me right now. I wish I could look at your faces and see who's familiar with this first game. It is a great game to play with your kids. What's the time, Mr. Wolf? For those of you who don't know how to play it, I'll give you some really quick instructions. What's the time, Mr. Wolf involves a group of children asking this question repeatedly to the other child, who's the wolf, right? So they say, what's the time, Mr. Wolf? And this child answers back with different times, like it's 5 o'clock, it's 7 o'clock, it's 2 o'clock, etc. And the children take that corresponding number of steps forward in the direction of the wolf, waiting to hear dinner time. And when they hear that, they have to all run back to the beginning and not get caught. This game, like many other games which follow a similar structure, these are your playground games, these provide a natural and fun context for drill-like repetition or formulaic language as well. So this is almost like a drill. And if you start that off by drilling them with these sentences, you can have them repeating it over and over again. This makes them the perfect vehicle for the teaching and learning of chunks of language and features of pronunciation like connected speech and sentence stress. Listen to that again. What's the time, Mr. Wolf? 1 o'clock, or it's 1 o'clock. Can you hear? Can you just imagine that over and over again? They'll play and they'll repeat this. Other classic children's games like Duck, Duck, Goose can be adapted to be played in many different ways. Now, some of these can focus on a specific problem, and that might be in either like response to something that you've heard that they have trouble with, or it could be in anticipation as well of potential problems with pronunciation. You all have to know the game Duck, Duck, Goose. I'm sure you do. The students sit in a circle and one of the children walk around the outside, gently tapping each of their peers as they chant, duck, 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 duck. And when the child says goose, the child who was tapped must jump up and chase the first child around the circle, trying to catch her before she sits down in the now empty space in the circle. So imagine the potential for working on pronunciation with this fantastic, fun, easy to teach game. Let me give you a few ideas. Imagine using this to work on any pair of words that can contain challenging sounds for your learners. Think about those minimal pairs. Think about the long and short vowel sounds, or even singular and plural nouns could be used here. And they're things which appear in your curriculum naturally. And you could use this game as a way of working on the pronunciation and the vocabulary at the same time. What's great about this game too is that it provides opportunities for both production of the different phonemes or the different words and recognition of those. So I think this is a really great way of taking this game that you're probably using with your students anyway and giving it a pronunciation twist. The last one I want to talk to you about is one you may have seen me do before with teachers when I'm doing my teacher training courses. It's called Walk, Don't Touch. Now, again, you can use this game to find pairs of words. You can use them to find minimal pairs of words. Basically, what you're going to do is hand out two corresponding cards, pairs of cards, to distribute pairs of cards among your students. You get them walking around the room as you chant, walk, don't touch, walk, don't touch, walk, don't touch, and stop. And on stop, students stop in front of facing a peer, one of their peers, and they have to read out what's on their card. Or if you've got pre-readers, you can get them to say the picture that they've got on their card, name the picture on their card, and they have to try and find their pair. This is another really easy, fun way to integrate pronunciation into your lesson with things that you're already doing. Presenting these kinds of activities in the format of a game takes it to a whole new level of fun. It's more engaging and consequently more memorable for our students. So there are 3 great ideas that you can use tomorrow if you like. Songs, rhymes, and chants. Oh, I love songs, rhymes, and chants with my students. Everybody uses songs, rhymes, and chants with their children. Songs and chants are used with children even before they begin to speak. This type of pre-linguistic play, that's what Cook calls it, is said to be invaluable for babies to perceive phonemic contrasts. And there is no doubt that they are a wonderful way to develop the first language and have so much potential in the second or other additional language classroom. So in the book, and I am in love with this book, I really recommend that you get your hands on a copy of Language Play, Language Learning by Cook. He gives 2 wonderful examples of children's rhymes that I have used time and time again with my very young learners. Both of them are examples of rhymes that, although, and I'm going to say them to you. I'm not going to do them on anyone, but I'll say them to you. Although they might not, you'll see they don't carry a lot of semantic meaning. It's a lot of nonsense talk that doesn't make a lot of sense for the learner initially. They do provide rich exposure to features of English pronunciation, which us language teachers can exploit. The first rhyme is called This Little Piggy. I'm sure some of you know this one. I'm sure of it. This little piggy is traditionally used with babies before they speak when mum and dad are helping them to dry off after a shower or a bath. And this little piggy, the adult has their foot in their hands, and they grab each little toe as they read out this little, or they say this rhyme. It goes, this little piggy went to market. This little piggy stayed home. This little piggy had roast beef, and this little piggy had none. And this little piggy went wee, 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 all the way home. And on the wee, 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 the adult tickles the little child all the way up and tickles them under their arm. And it is just the cutest, sweetest little interaction moment between an adult and a child that you can imagine. It is just beautiful. And just like other sort of, you might know, round and round the garden like a teddy bear. 1 step, 2 step, tickle you under there. These kinds of little chants are just delightful in the young learner classroom. It doesn't matter that they don't understand the meaning of the words yet. There is so much happening there pronunciation-wise. It is so beneficial that it's definitely worth doing. The next one I have there is eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Again, this makes very little sense, but it does have a functional purpose in your classroom. If you're going to play a game like hide and seek or some kind of game where a child has to be it, like who's going to be the wolf and what's the time, Mr. Wolf, everybody puts their fist into a circle and you go around counting. In fact, I've got this. Let me share this with you. Okay. I hope, can you see my screen? Let me just check. Can I just get a confirmation?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you very much. Okay, so here it is. This is my Instagram account. Go check it out if you're interested in any more of my ideas for teaching kids. I share a lot on my Instagram account. And I've got this video from, it must have been sometime last year. And I had done eeny, meeny, miny, mo with my students maybe a handful of times. Yeah, look, I've even written it in the description here. I've done it with them 3 times before this. Look at how much they've picked up. They haven't got all the words right yet, but just have a listen and look at this.
Meeny, miny, mo, catch a star, let it go. If you squeal, let it go. Meeny, miny, mo. Meeny, miny, mo, catch a star, let it go. If you squeal, let it go. Meeny, miny, mo. Okay, did you catch that? It goes, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the toe. If he squeals, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. The kids just love that, and they did it again and again and again and again, and eventually they got it beautifully, beautifully. What a wonderful way of working on pronunciation. The next one I want to share with you, let's pull my things up here, is Gimme 5.
Gimme 5 is a game that you can play. It's just for fun. Again, you can use these as children grow and develop their language and their vocabulary, and perhaps can even understand parts of what they're chanting or singing. Most of these rhymes are full of nonsense language, but they're still highly beneficial for language development. You do not, what's interesting about any of these examples that I've given you so far is there's no need to grade the language or to translate anything to Portuguese. You can use these kinds of rhymes and finger plays and skipping and clapping games, knowing that your students will respond enthusiastically to them and they're going to reap the benefits. This, as I said before, is exactly what we were talking about with intuitive, imitative approach to pronunciation teaching. That it really just depends on the learner's ability to listen and imitate the rhythms and the sounds of the target language without needing any intervention or any explicit information. So like I promised, these are things that you can just start doing with your kids. Gimme 5 is, I wish I had someone to do this here with me. Gimme 5, you put out your hand. Can I unshare this screen so you can see me again? There we go. Can you see me? I'm gonna show you how to do gimme 5 on the side. It goes like this. You put your hand out. Thiago, can you see me?
Yes, perfectly.
Good. You put your hand out and you go like this. You go, gimme 5. And the kid goes. And you say, on the side. And the kid goes. This is so weird doing it to myself. Up high. Down low. Too slow. Gimme 10. Missed again. And you can do this over and over again. And the rhyme and the rhythm that you build up with this kind of fun little game, again, is working pronunciation. And then you can get them making up their own little chants. Hit the jelly. Poke your belly. Go crazy. Get creative with that and see what you and your kids come up with. That brings me to working with songs. Writing your own songs. I mean, everybody uses songs already with their kids. I mean, it's just a staple in the young learner classroom, right? So I wanted to do something, or I wanted to offer you something perhaps that you hadn't tried before, but is really, really beneficial as well. And that is writing your own songs and chants with the kids. I think that when we allow students to use English, when we allow students to use English creatively like this, in some way, we're giving them a sense of ownership of the English language. It's not just about listen and repeat. It's about owning the language, making it theirs, experimenting with it, taking risks, personalizing it so that it's meaningful and more memorable again. They're also obviously perfect for teaching features of pronunciation, because when you have to write a song, you have to think about strong and weak forms, sentence stress, and the pronunciation of challenging phonemes and rhythm and all of these kinds of things. So to do this activity, though, you need to bear a couple of things in mind, okay? This is not a task for, obviously, pre-literate students. This is for kids who are already reading and writing in Portuguese and starting to read and write in English. But keep this in mind. They may not have had exposure to this writing genre before, even in their first language. So they're going to need a lot of support for this activity and more than one opportunity to try it out. So here are a couple of ways that you can provide support for writing your own songs and chants. The first one is make sure you're teaching lots of vocabulary in context. Okay, make sure that you're not just teaching word lists with your young learners, please. So this is not on the day that you're going to do this activity, but all throughout the school year, make sure that vocabulary is presented in context. And you will need to teach them explicitly about syllables and rhyming words. That's a lot of fun. You should also give them access to tools for finding rhyming words. I recommend this great website called Rhyme Zone, super easy to use. If you have access to the internet, that's a good one. And don't forget to scaffold this activity. And one way of a really nice structure or framework for doing any kind of writing activity with your kids is to model how to create a chant by doing it yourself for them as an example, then creating one together before finally getting them to do it on their own or in pairs. Here are the steps for creating your own jazz chant or song. And I have taken these ideas from another wonderful book by Carolyn Graham. What you need to do, or what you need to start off with, is by writing a list of keywords that you want to work on. And these might be words that are related to a theme you're working on, or useful classroom language that you want to teach, or even the student's name at the beginning of the year. You want around at least 10 words. And then with them, you can make a list of rhyming words. So this is where you teach about rhyming. And you can even send the students to Rhyme Zone if you like. And then you need to write a list of individual words or phrases which are going to describe or even add information to your list of keywords. So if you were doing food, for example, you might use fresh, frozen, and delicious. So divide the words into groups according to the number of syllables. And then you can take, just to make this a little bit easier, I like to take songs that they are already familiar with the tune and just give them new lyrics. So that's a really good way of doing it. Creating your own, creating a song or chant, or letting your students create their own songs or chants may seem kind of scary, but don't underestimate kids. Let them have a go at it. Let them have another go at it and another go at it. And eventually you'll have them coming up with some really, really amazing things. And this is so good on so many levels for so many areas of language development. Pronunciation is also one of them. Okay? So moving on to stories. Oh, I love telling stories with my students. My goodness. Anyone who knows me also knows that I am all about storytelling. It's one of my favorite things to do with my students. And I believe that it is a skill that every young learner teacher should develop. When choosing a story and preparing to read it aloud to your kids, there are some very specific things that you can do that will make story time useful for teaching vocabulary, but also pronunciation. Keep these things in mind, and you are going to be you're on your way to introducing or incorporating pronunciation into your classes. Here we go. The first one is really, really important, people. Look at the language of the book. Now, what do I mean here? You might think, oh, she means that make sure that it's not too difficult for the students to understand. I'm actually talking about the opposite, okay? I want you to keep your eye out for those books for language learners that have been graded so much that it's become unnatural. And I see a lot of these big books for language learners that just, they don't use contractions, for example. And then the teacher starts reading them aloud to the students, and she sounds like a robot. It is a terrible model. We were talking about the importance of providing a good model. The book that you choose needs to provide a model of natural language so that when you read it aloud, it flows. The next tip that I'm going to give you is look for stories with a lot of rhyme and or repetition. Let me think of a great example there. Put my head. Oh, here's one everyone's going to know. Brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Look at that rhyme. Red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me. Look at that repetition. Oh, listen to the way it flows. It's just beautiful. So yeah, look for stories with rhyme and repetition, and practice the story by reading it aloud to yourself before you try and read it to your students. You want to make sure that you can get this down. You know, you don't want to be stumbling over words or not having the flow as you work with this. Okay, so be consistent. Modify the length and the language if you need to. So there are certain books that don't repeat, so I take a certain part of it and I'll repeat that on every page or something like that. I do modify the length as well for certain age groups, but I'm very consistent about that. So I make a note of it on a Post-it note, and I always read out the same thing. It's really important, be consistent. And read the book many, many times. Children love repetition. They're not going to get sick of it. Give them opportunities to read on their own as well. And I'm talking about even the littlest learners, those tiny, tiny ones. I'm going to show you this lovely story. Tiago, just a confirmation from you that you can see this book.
Yes, we can see the book.
Are you ready to? Are you ready for like a cuteness overdose?
I'm looking forward to it. I'm dying.
I am.
Little Pedro. Pedro is 3 years old. He had just started learning English with me. We were a couple of months into English classes. And I had been reading a children's classic that I know many of you watching will know, Dear Zoo. And I always offer free reading time after I've read a story aloud. The children are invited to come and choose a story and sit down and read it. And I just died when I saw him and I listened to him reading. I had a little group, you can see someone's foot there, a little group of friends around him listening to him read. Obviously, he wasn't really reading, but just listen to this. Oh, gente. Oh, my goodness. I know I'm going to play it. No, I'm not going to play it one more time yet. I'm going to talk to you about me as a teacher observing this, getting over the cuteness overload that it obviously was. I wrote to the zoo. He's even mimicking the gestures that I do. Like, I was just, after I got over that, what I do is I use this not as a time for correction. I use this as a time to observe my learners. I observe lots of things while they're doing free play or free reading. What do you think I observed in his language there? I'm going to play it one more time, and I want you to listen and try and listen. What do you think I noticed about his, forget the vocabulary, forget everything else, just concentrate on the pronunciation. Here we go. I died. Okay, so here are some of the things I noticed here. He says, I won't to the zoo. I won't. He uses a W sound instead of an R sound. But you know what? If you know just even a little bit about childhood development, or you have a child yourself, or you've observed children, you'll know that pronunciation error is very typical for this age. Very typical. So I also noticed about sentence stress and the use of weak forms. Listen to the way he says, I wrote to the zoo. That you can really hear the emphasis on those content words there. Amazing. I also noticed send me a pet. He says send me instead of to send me. But listen to the sound of the T in pet. To send me a pet. Very good pronunciation of that last T, considering the problems that this sound normally causes Brazilian Portuguese speakers, right? Pet, you might expect. So listen again to see if you can pick up those things. Oh, amazing. Well done, Pedro. Well done. What do you think I corrected? Or how do you think I corrected his pronunciation? Well, as you begin to work with more pronunciation in your lessons, which I hope you will, it's really important for you to consider how you're going to give feedback to learners. Now, there is absolutely no time for me to look at that in this workshop, but I do think it's worth mentioning just briefly that children should not be overcorrected, especially when they're practicing freely and taking risks with the language like they are in the clip that I just showed you. This stage of the lesson that you just saw was free reading time, like I mentioned. So I really just take notes on grammar, vocab, and pronunciation, and I can work on any of that stuff later on. I also take a notice of lots of different things, what they're interested in, who's working well with who, etc. But if you, again, it's about being conscious or putting pronunciation back on the agenda. Having a recording of this clip or of your children's speech is wonderful as well for making diagnostics. So It's such a joy to see the language which emerges spontaneously as they flip through these books that we've read together. And it just confirms for me, again, the importance of making sure we're providing students with good quality input in our lessons. Not just playing audios, not just using these graded readers from the book might have in them, but getting real text, reading with your kids. It is so, so wonderful. It's one of the richest sources of input in our class, I think, is our teacher talk. So let's talk about our teacher talk. Let's talk about quality teacher talk time. Oh, I'm going out on a limb with this. I want to share with you because, you know, I know I'm taking a risk talking about this, because when you do your CELTA and your Delta, we're just told constantly less teacher talk time, more student talk time. But I think the children really do need lots and lots of input, and not any old input, good quality input. So I want to take a moment to talk about this. And I want to give a shout out to someone who a lot of you here in Brazil know, Elcio Souza. I saw a talk on pronunciation earlier this year by Elcio. What a great speaker. And in this talk, he talked about the role of teacher talk in the development of the pronunciation of our learners. And I think he makes an excellent point. He said, grading language does not mean abandoning features of connected speech. And if we teach speaking word for word, our students will never learn how to join them. And, you know, I was preparing, I had this webinar in my mind already. And when I heard him say that, it just made me flash back to how many classrooms, how many teachers, young learner teachers, wonderful young learner teachers have I observed, who grade their language so much that it just becomes completely unnatural. Completely unnatural. And they do that out of fear that their students will not understand them if they speak quickly in English. So what do I think about that? Or what is the point that I want to make about that? Your pronunciation matters. I said it before, I'll say it again. Your pronunciation matters. We have to acknowledge the importance of providing quality teacher talk in the young learner classroom. Children need lots of natural, clear language that provides them with a model that they can copy. So I don't know why so many teachers feel that they need to modify their language so much. Let me tell you, speaking like a robot is not going to make it easier for them to understand the words you're using. This is not the right technique. Let me teach you an easy way that you can transition your students from one activity to another. This is just one example. I'm going to concentrate today on transitions. I'm going to teach you some techniques that you can use to transition your students in a way that they will understand you perfectly, and you will retain all of the beautiful pronunciation features. And this technique does not involve translation, or it doesn't involve L1. So this is the last thing that I'm going to be sharing with you today. I actually say that I spend the first 6 months singing in my classroom. And that's because in the beginning, I add music to all of my classroom instructions, like all of these lesson stages. Starting the class, come and sit down on the floor, come and sit down on the floor, circle time, circle time, circle time, circle, circle, circle time, story time, story time, story time, tidy up, everybody tidy up, get in line. This little group of mine, they're gonna get in line. Literally, I add music to everything, all of my classroom instructions. And children can learn to recognize the songs much quicker than the words. So if you team that up with regular and predictable class routine and the gestures that I use, my students understand what is expected of them in just a few classes. I promise you, if you do the same, you will have the same results. This, especially with Brazilian students, who I have been amazed to see how well they respond to music. This kind of classroom language is very deliberate and planned. And after a while, I can actually remove the music from these commands, and it becomes something like, come and sit down on the floor, circle time, story time, get in line, everybody tidy up. And then I can even switch it up, or I can extend this language with time. And I can say, come and sit down next to me, or come and sit down on a chair. Can you see the way the music has been removed, but my language is still flowing and very, very natural. Finally, you're going to see the children using this language too with each other and with you, and they will use it naturally and fluently and appropriately. So these are just a few ideas of how you can integrate pronunciation work into your lessons by just raising your awareness. You can make small changes to what you already are doing that are going to make a very big impact. I'm going to wrap it up here now. And in conclusion, what I would like to say is I think that the fact that we're all here tonight at, almost 10:30 at night to discuss pronunciation in the young learner classroom is a clear sign to me that this is an area of language teaching that we all value and we recognize as being important and an integral part of language teaching and learning. So now I'm going to pose to you the same question that I asked at the start of this session. Is it reasonable to expect young learner teachers to work on pronunciation with their learners on top of all of the other responsibilities they have? And is it even worth dedicating our limited class time to this? What do you say? I hope that in this session I've managed to convince you to give a few new ideas a try. Please do get in contact with me. I have a Facebook group called Young Learners Q&A, and if you would like to keep talking about this or any other topic related to young learners, I would love to see you in that Facebook group. Come on by. It is not supposed to replace any other Facebook group. It is supposed to complement the questions that keep emerging in webinars like this, in groups that I don't get a chance to respond to. So it's just an extension of what we're already doing. It was such a pleasure to be with you all here. Thank you again to BrELT, my wonderful online community who I really value so much. And thank you very much.
Well, people answered your question, Claire, here in the comments. So guess what?
I didn't see any of them.
Well, guess what? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. They do think it's possible.
Viva, yeah. Viva. Tiago, thanks very much. While you keep talking, Tiago, I'm just going to share my last slide that has some references for further reading.
Okay, sure. People have asked about references and everything, so they're going to be very happy to see those. Good.
Great, great, great. Oh, sorry about all of those bullet points there, but there's a slide.
Wonderful.
Further reading, yeah.
Amazing, Claire. Very, very good. Thank you so much for this lovely presentation. It was very, very inspiring.
It was such an honor to kickstart this week. Thank you so much for the invitation. You know I love all of you, so thank you very much.
Some comments and some things that came up during the webinar. Something that Gisele mentioned is that here in Brazil, and I wouldn't say it's just in Brazil, I would add this happens all over the world. Young learner teachers, they are sometimes the least qualified because they aren't paid as well as people who teach teens or adults. So sometimes instead of because there hadn't been work on pronunciation, teens and adults, they have fossilized errors, and that's very difficult to deal with.
Gisele, what a very, very insightful comment to have made, and certainly one that I am very passionate about, the importance of improving. It's actually one of my missions to improve the status and training and access to training and pay that young learner teachers have. I've actually got a post on One Stop English where I rattle on passionately about this exact same thing, and it can be really hard. And one thing that I was almost going to mention in this talk, but then I decided not to, I'll mention now, is that when I had to learn about pronunciation, because as a native speaker, we don't learn about pronunciation and phonological features of our language and any of this. So when I was doing my diploma, I had to learn about it, and I can love the IPA. I'm a big fan of it. And it was really empowering for me. So grabbing a book like Sound Foundations by Underhill, or Mark Hancock's book, Pronunciation Games, right? Have I got that right? he's got great, pronunciation games. It's a classic. I think that it's get your hands on that. Or Jared Kelly, I think I've got that in my list of references. He's got How to Teach Pronunciation. Empower yourself. It feels great to have this knowledge, and it can just complement what you're already doing in the classroom beautifully. I don't think we can talk about language development for the English teacher without mentioning Igor here, who's been on a mission to raise awareness of the importance for teachers to work on their English. And he's been doing that beautifully. He's got lots written about this topic, and I'm really looking forward to seeing his talk tomorrow as well.
Yes, and when it comes to comments, for instance, while you're talking about the story time and how important that is, Jay mentioned that God is still remember story time as a kid, and I'm 45 now. So that just shows us how important and how memorable those moments are, right?
Yeah, it's about that human interaction as well. Exactly the same thing that Cook talks about in language play, language learning, or language learning, language play. Beautiful book. He talks about you feel like the students are there passively listening, but it is very, very an interactive experience. It's through the eye contact, it's through the voices that you use. It is a skill. It's an art form, even reading stories aloud, and it is just something that we should all be doing, I think, regularly with our young learners. And I love this idea of using real books, not using books which are specifically for language learners, but finding really good books for children.
And while you were talking about, when you asked them about correction techniques, Vinicius Tavares suggested echoing the right pronunciation. What do you think about this technique, and how do you think it can be applied to young learners?
Absolutely. Like recasting is a technique that mothers use a lot with their children as well. You never hear a mother correcting her child saying, no, you needed to have used the past simple, ever. But when children, in fact, what happens when little babies are first starting to learn to speak? What happens when they make a mistake? Normally, any utterance that comes out of your baby's mouth is like praised, like, oh, listen, he's saying mummy. Look, did you hear him? He's like, oh, he's saying mummy. Parents really give a lot of encouragement to their children, and I think we should be doing that to our young learners as well. But we need to be aware. We need to have a range of correction techniques in our teaching toolkit, and one of those would be echoing. And like when you recast, when they say something to you and you repeat it back without getting like drilling them or anything. Drills are good and drills have a place, but there is a wide range of techniques that I just couldn't fit in. Didn't have time to talk about. There was no sort of space for it in this talk.
Problem.
But yeah, do check that out, and think carefully, like I mentioned briefly, think carefully about when you're doing your correction as much as how.
Claire, can you hear me?
I can.
Someone asked about your favorite young learners book. What is your favorite book?
Like my favorite storybook?
No.
To read.
Technology, right?
For pronunciation or methodology in general?
I think it's in general for young learners.
Lynn Cameron's book.
Yeah. Dan Cameron, yes.
Yeah, Teaching Languages to Young Learners. If you're following me on Instagram, what I'm actually doing my stories as well is every time I'm reading something new, I'm sharing what I'm reading and some interesting insights for that too. So yeah, do check out Active English for Kids, my Instagram account, and you can yes, check out lots of great things. I love reading about methodology. I am a #ELT nerd, confessed and proud.
We are, right? So
we all are.
Yeah, we all are. Thank you very much for this inspiring.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good night, BrELTers.
Thiago, do you want to share the news about the certificate?
Yes, please. If you are interested in getting a certificate for this session, you would go to bit.ly, Ly is ly, /BrELT Prun Week. From I'm going to say it again, BrELT Prun from pronunciation week, 2018 certificate.
Yeah,
So
hurry and go there and fill in the form so that you can get your certificates.
yeah, because the form is just going to be open for 15 minutes after the session. So you have to be really fast.
Ooh,
And
wow.
Claire, just a last minute question. Rosanna is asking you, what is your favorite storybook for young learners?
That is really, really hard to choose. I've got my top 5 stories on my blog. I will share that link, and you can check out not only my 5 top stories for working with language learners, I've included lots of really nice ideas of how you can use that story as a jump off point for learning English. So I'll share that link.
Okay. Just a second, Claire. Thiago, the link is not working for the certificates. Can you double check? I know there's an L missing in BrELT, but I tried and it didn't work.
Yeah, so again, because you need to, the link doesn't appear in the YouTube chat, regardless of how we do it. So you need to copy and paste the link. So
Yeah,
again, the link is bit.ly, ly is ly. So BrELT Prawn Week 2018 certificate.
Prawn Week 2018 certificates.
Yes, certificate.
Now working.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Wait a second, guys. Like something's come up and we're trying to fix it.
Yes, it's good. The link works. It's just that I had mistyped it and I forgot an extra L there, but now it's all working. So remember to copy the link and paste it to your browser. Good.
Yeah. Have people got it?
Mm-hmm. So Claire, go on, please.
That's it. That's it.
Okay.
Say good night now, I think, and see you all online real soon.
Yes, definitely. And tomorrow we what time is it? The session, Igor session tomorrow, 9 o'clock or 9:30 also, right?
Yeah, tomorrow we're going to have Igor, and Igor is going to talk about something that is very interesting and often overlooked, which is pronunciation to improve students' listening skills. And Igor is going to start at 9:30 p.m. as well. So make sure you don't miss him.
And Igor is someone you want to watch, right? Don't miss it, people. So see you tomorrow. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everyone. Good night.